What's up, guys? Toad back with you again. I skipped the card yesterday. Skip it. At least I basically had the NFL game right yesterday, even though I didn't play anything on it. I was right about the Chiefs winning and covering. I was right about that game being low scoring and New Orleans especially struggling offensively. So I nailed all that. Kansas City Chiefs, man, it's just hilarious. They look like the Chiefs from whatever it was, like 5 years ago or something now, because they got Juju Smith-Schuster is apparently back on the team, and because they have so many injuries, he was playing yesterday, and he was looking like he hasn't missed a beat. They got Kareem Hunt in there. All they need to do now is get Tyreek Hill back, and then they'll look like the Kansas City Chiefs from multiple years ago. It's just wild, man. That is some wild stuff. The baseball continues. I'll talk about baseball first here. I do have one play in baseball, even though I'm actually joining the public on this one, and the market doesn't look to be in agreement with it. And I'm going to play one hockey play, which you know what it is, because I already said that I was probably going to do it. I think the motivational aspects of it are there, even though I don't like playing on the first day of NHL usually, but I think the situation's decent enough for it, and I have my Bruins hat on just to kick off the season, and I'm going to be extra biased with that one tonight. I hope these plays don't. I mean, these plays have the potential to go completely poorly. And then I'll talk about college football, because we've now entered the time of year where college football is on college or NFL is on every single day for the next however many weeks in a row, because now you get college football on Tuesday, college football on Wednesday, and it is not the MAC this time. It's Conference USA. So I'm going to talk about all of that and hopefully talk about all these things as quickly as I can here. I'll start with Major League Baseball. The NLDS series continue today, as we've had situations where these series have just kind of been alternating days. So the NL played 2 days ago, so these teams had yesterday off. Now they're playing today, and it makes sense in this case because they've switched venues. So we're now going to the other team's stadium in these series now. Every series, by the way, in the NLDS and the ALDS, they're all tied 1-1, and apparently that's the first time that's ever happened in Major League history, which seems kind of weird to me because it doesn't seem that crazy that it would have happened before, but apparently it is not. So that's what we're looking at. Every series is tied 1-1, obviously, including these two today. We got Philly and the Mets and Dodgers, San Diego, and these series have shifted to the home stadium of the non-home team in the series. So we're going to New York and we're going to San Diego for these. Not a lot of travel in those situations, obviously, but that is how these series work out. Where am I going with this? I do have one play, and it is on this Philadelphia Mets game, even though, like I said, I am joining the public, and it is on the total, but the side is difficult to gauge in these games, man. Philadelphia is up from -112 to -113 as a road favorite. They got 63% of the tickets on them, so they're public. Looks like the line has moved up on them just very slightly, but the cash looks like it's pretty strongly on the Mets side. So I see pretty strong indicators actually on the side in both of these games, but I'm not sure that I can join where the professionals seem to be on either one of these sides, man. I don't think I can do it. So it does look like the money is coming in on the Mets side. The Mets won game one in this series. Philadelphia won game two. And in both games, I think the starters pitched pretty well in both games. And then the bullpens just didn't do well in either game. And I've mentioned before, Philadelphia's bullpen is not good. The Mets bullpen is better, but the Mets bullpen has been struggling recently and in the playoffs as well. So you probably know where I'm going with the total on this one. But that is what has happened in both games this series so far. I think we've seen offensive outbursts in both games late in each game. I think the first one was really just the Mets doing it. And in the second game, I think it was both teams doing it. So we look at this pitching matchup here, and Aaron Nola against Sean Manaea. I mean, on the surface, looks like it's a pretty good pitching duel, right? You got Aaron Nola. He's making his first playoff start this season, but his playoff numbers overall, well, I guess I'll get to it when I probably talk about my play on the total here. But overall, his stats pretty good on the season. 3.57 ERA, 1.2 WHIP. He's a veteran pitcher. He's been around for a long time. He's made a lot of playoff appearances, and they've all been in the last couple of years with Philadelphia. This is his first playoff start this season. He finished The season, though, a little bit iffy, man. Even though a 44-8 strikeout walk ratio looks really good in September, he allowed a lot of hits. He allowed 7 home runs in the month of September, 38 hits in 33 innings. None of that looks good, and a 4.91 ERA. So he was getting hit in the last month of the season. So not necessarily a good sign that he wasn't in great form coming into the playoffs here. Now he's had some extended time off, which pitchers, man, I mean, as I mentioned repeatedly, they're like creatures of habit. They want to stay like on their schedule, and he is not staying on his schedule. He's now going to be thrown off a little bit, having not pitched since September 29th. So he's had a little bit of extra time off here, so that's not good. And then his stats against the Mets are actually not as good as you would expect. The Mets have seen him a ton, 243 at bats worth, and they actually have 10 home runs off of him. 70-22 strikeout walk ratio is not too bad, but he has allowed them to hit 272 off of him, so he has not done too well against them, although a lot of the damage has been done by Pete Alonso, who has really hit him pretty hard. But 5 of the home runs are from him, but still, overall, 272 batting average and 777 OPS allowed. So Nola, his stats are not very good against the Mets. And then on the other side, Sean Manaea is pitching. He had a decent season as well, 3.47 ERA, a good season, really, and a 1.08 whip. I think was probably one of his lowest that he's recorded in his career. He's usually a guy that, as I mentioned, he has a little bit of control issues typically, but this season, maybe not as much, or he was just pretty unhittable. He pitched decently down the stretch with a 3.32 ERA in September, although he did allow 5 home runs. So both these guys struggled to contain the long ball in September. And then he did make 1 appearance in the wild card round. So he has pitched already once. So that maybe gives him a little bit of an edge in the fact that he has pitched once in the playoffs this year already. Although Nola, I mean, he's an experienced playoff pitcher at the very least. So I don't think the experience is really much of an issue here. Manaea actually has less experience. I think he's only made 3 starts in his postseason career, and he made 1 start, and it was an okay start against Milwaukee. They lost the game, and he went 5 innings, allowing 2 earned runs. Not terrible. Didn't walk anybody, which his control seems to be decent, in decent shape right now. 4 strikeouts and 6 hits allowed. Not a bad start from Manaea, but Philadelphia is very good against Manaea. In 97 at-bats worth, they've hit 10 home runs off him. That is an insane rate, dude. They're hitting home runs against him more than once per every 10 at-bat, and it's pretty spread out other than Castellanos hitting 3 home runs off him. The rest of the home runs are pretty spread out throughout their entire lineup, so most of their lineup kind of hits him pretty hard. He does have a 24-6 strikeout walk ratio against him, so that's pretty good. But Philadelphia has a 309 batting average off him. I don't know if I just said the Mets when I met Philly. I don't know. I always just keep talking, and I don't think before I talk, man, so I make mistakes on the show. It's all right. Philadelphia has a 309 average off him and 1,027 OPS off him. We're looking at big sample sizes here, so you know where I'm going with this. Neither pitcher has very good stats against the opposing hitters, so rather than trying to choose the side here, even though, I mean, I guess you would have to lean with what the market is saying here and lean to the Mets side here, but I don't want to do it because Manaea's numbers are not good, as I just showed you, against Philadelphia, so I just can't jump in on that, even though the Mets probably have a little bit of a bullpen edge here because Philly's bullpen is really not good, but Philly's offense is better than the Mets' offense is. So rather than doing that, I'm jumping on the total. And what am I doing on this total? I forgot to put it in here. Let me see here. I will enter it in real quickly as I keep talking, but let me see here. Although I can't do many things at once, I'm going to play on the over in this one, Philadelphia and the Mets over the total. And that's going to be at minus 115 is the best that I can find it, because right now the total in this one, it was at 7.5, and it's down to 7 juice to the over. 87% of the tickets and only 81% of the cash on the over. So the public is coming in on the over. But in this case, I just don't think they're wrong. And I would rather have the 7, obviously. The 7 is a key number. So going over 7.5 is a lot worse. Most of the 7s out there are minus 120 right now for the over. I found a minus 115 at Caesars, I think. So, I mean, those numbers are out there. I mean, shop around, obviously, if you want this. If you play the over 7.5, you can get it at plus money, but obviously it's because 7 is a key number in baseball. when teams have to break a 3-3 tie. Obviously, you need that one extra run there to break the tie. So looking at this, as I already mentioned, both of these starting pitchers have been pretty bad against these opposing lineups. So the hitters seem to have the advantage against these hitters historically, right? So the both opposing lineups have good numbers against these opposing starters. So the starting pitching matchup doesn't look that great for the pitcher side of things in either case. So we have that going for us here. Then we look at what else is going on here. There's a lot of familiarity here. Both starting lineups have seen a lot of these starting pitchers, so there is familiarity here as well. Nola just pitched against the Mets on September 13th, and he did not do well. He did strike out 7 guys, but he gave up 6 earned runs, 2 home runs, 2 walks, 6 hits, and 4 1/3. So he got messed up in that game. That was in Philadelphia against the Mets. That was the last time he faced them. So that means the Mets beat him up recently, and the Mets just saw him not that long ago. So that looks like an extra little bit of an edge for the Mets hitters there. And then Manaea also faced Philadelphia more recently on September 21st. And he did pretty well in that game, to be honest. A 6-0 strikeout walk ratio, 3 earned runs allowed in 7 innings, only 3 hits. Not bad. He held them down, but 2 of those hits were home runs. So again, he's been struggling with the long ball. So he pitched decently, but as I showed you, his numbers overall against Philly, even including that start, in a big sample size, are not very good. Philadelphia has been able to hit him. His numbers are actually worse than Nola's against the opposing lineups here. So you get that situation where both starting pitchers are pretty familiar to the opposing hitters. The opposing hitters do well against both starting pitchers. This is like a conflagration of a lot of things, man. And both offenses just saw these opposing pitchers as well. So they're pretty familiar with them anyway, and they're recently familiar with them too. So the offenses should have a little bit of an extra edge because of that as well. Philly's offense is good in general. Philly's bullpen is not good. So a lot of things leaning towards the over in this one. And then I don't have it up because it's on Yahoo. I should start bringing these up, but Aaron Nola, like I said, he's made a lot of playoff starts. He's made, I believe, 8 or 9 starts in the playoffs across the last 2 seasons. So he's really used to pitching in the playoffs, but his numbers aren't that good in the playoffs. He has like an overall, he has like a 4-something ERA across those 2 seasons in the playoffs. So nothing to really write home about. Nothing horrible, but still not great. And then Manaea, in his playoff outings, he's made 3 starts. And yes, his most recent one was the one this year against the Brewers. And that one was pretty decent. That was a decent start, but including that, his other 2 starts are so bad that across 3 starts in his playoff career, he's gone 8 1/3 innings and allowed 11 earned runs in those 8 1/3 innings. So Manaea has not had a good track record in the postseason with an ERA of like 10 or 11, even including the one good start this year. So his ERA was really horrific coming into this season in his postseason career. So he hasn't done well in the postseason, although maybe you can take more away from what his most recent start was, and it was a little bit better. But his stats against Philadelphia, not good, although I don't think they were that good against the Brewers either. But this is a situation also where, I mean, you have 2 starting pitchers that have really nice ERAs in the 3s. So it's going to have the odds makers giving you a pretty low total here. This, on the surface, looks like a pitching duel. But as I'm telling you, you uncover all these other numbers, and it's anything but that. So I think you're actually getting value fading that line there and playing the over here, because it looks like on the surface both starting pitchers are pretty good, and they are, but as I showed you, Nola is kind of fading down the stretch a little bit. Both starting pitchers have bad numbers against the opposing lineups. The opposing lineups are very familiar with them. They both saw them recently, and neither starting pitcher does very well in the postseason either. So it's just a conflagration of a lot of things. And then if that's not enough to make the case for the over here, these teams have played 9 games recently, going back to, they had 2 recent series, like close to the end of the season here. I think both series are in the month of September, and then including those and including the postseason, where I believe both of these games went over the total, or they at least both went over this total. In those 9 games, 7 of them have gone over, and a lot of them have gone over fairly significantly. So they've got, these teams, when playing each other, have gone 7-2 to the over in the last 9 games, including both games in this series so far. Granted, it was a lot of damage in the later innings in both of these games, so the starters did do well in the previous games in this series, but still, I mean, that puts me on the over here in this one, man. So that's the over. Let's see if I can get these things done here. Well, I have to talk about hockey. Hockey will be quick. I think I'm not going to go as in depth with hockey because I don't know as much about hockey, but I still play hockey, and I have done fairly well since I started doing hockey. So, Dodgers, San Diego's the other game. San Diego's up from -145 to -150, and to me, it looks like San Diego does have the starting pitching edge here, but it's factored into the price. Michael King has the way better numbers this year than Walker Buehler does. Walker Buehler had pretty good numbers in the past, but this year was just a big-time struggle for him. I don't know what has happened to him, but this year, he just has not been the same, man. I think he had maybe like a year or so like off from pitching in the majors, and he has just been off this entire season. He has not been good, whereas Michael King has been really good. But we see the public coming in on San Diego. They like what they saw out of San Diego, a blowout win for San Diego in that heated game in Game 2, which was the only blowout, actually, out of any of the games that these teams have played so far. I think Philly and the Mets had 2 close games. Dodgers, San Diego had 1 close game and 1 blowout win for San Diego. And San Diego could have won both games fairly easily. But we see 65% of the cash on the Dodgers, even though 62% of the tickets on San Diego. And total looks like it's actually moved towards the over. 7.5 juice to the under is flipped to 7.5 juice to the over. But 88% of the tickets and only 79% of the cash on the over. So both overs are public with slightly less of the cash than the tickets on the over. And obviously I like the over in the first game better than anything else, better than the sides, even though on the sides it looks like the cash discrepancy is indicating on the Mets and on the Dodgers. I don't necessarily, I mean, I guess I would lean to the Mets just because I don't really have a strong sense one way or the other on the side in that one, but I mean, and Manaea may have a slight edge just because he has 1 game under his belt, and Nola's schedule might be off a little bit, but obviously I like the over in that one. And this one, there's no way that I can play on Walker Buehler in this game, man. I mean, his stats have been awful all season. 5.38 ERA, 1.55 whip. I mean, what is there to like about this? The Dodgers, I mean, they started winning more of his starts more recently, but still, I mean, they've won maybe half of the games that he started. I mean, that's not great. He only went more than 5 1/3 in one of his recent starts in September. And before that, he wasn't even going 5 innings. I think the longest he's gone in any game was the 6-inning performance against a pretty bad Rockies lineup, and it was not at Coors Field. He's been bad overall, and in September, he wasn't really much better with a 4.44 ERA, allowing more than 1 hit per inning, 5 home runs, 25-10 strikeout walk ratio, so way too many walks, although 5 of them were in 1 game against the Braves. And he just faced San Diego on September 26th. Even though he only allowed 1 run in 5 innings in that game, he only went 71 pitches in that game, but maybe they kept him on an inning count or something. Maybe they just yanked him because they wanted to get him ready for the postseason. But the fact that he only struck out 1 guy in that game is kind of a red flag. He's not striking guys out. That means San Diego just saw him, so they're going to be a bit more familiar with him. But over his career, he has done well against San Diego in 157 at-bats worth 38-11 strikeout walk ratio, although he's allowed 5 home runs, but 4 of them are Tatis. And Tatis has also struck out 13 times off him, so it's basically literally hit or miss from Tatis against him. It's basically either a home run or a strikeout every time he's up. He's held San Diego to a 204 average and 594 OPS, so Buehler, that's probably why we see the cash coming in on the Buehler side, because his numbers are actually really good in his career against San Diego, but only 2 of those starts were this season, and one of them was terrible in May, where he only went 3 1/3, allowing 3 earned runs, putting 7 guys on base. So he had one really awful start against San Diego, and then a bit of a better one this time, the most recent one, but only 1 strikeout. So he's not the same pitcher, man. So I think his more recent performance is actually a better indicator than those really good numbers that he has against San Diego in the past. So I actually don't like Buehler's numbers. And I didn't go as far as looking at what their postseason stats are because I just decided I didn't want to play in this game at all. But Buehler, yes, he does have good career numbers against San Diego, but I think that that's kind of negated by how poorly he's pitched this year, including against San Diego. He hasn't been that great this year either. Michael King is definitely the pitcher who's in better form with a 2.95 ERA, 1.19 whip, and he already has one start under his belt in the postseason, whereas Buehler does not. Buehler has had that extra time off, too, so just like I said with Manaea, King will be the one here who's actually pitching on schedule here. So as far as, pitchers being like used to adhering to that schedule, King is on his usual schedule. Buehler is not. Buehler's had extra time off, and Buehler's been the pitcher who's in much poorer recent form, so I don't want to play on Buehler, obviously. King had a 1.57 ERA in 4 starts in September, and then he continued pitching really well with a nice performance against the Braves in the playoffs. That was a game that I won on, I think. He had 12 strikeouts, no walks, and a 7-inning, 5-hit shutout. And he didn't throw that many pitches either. He was pretty efficient despite 12 strikeouts. Only threw 89 pitches, not bad. So he's on his regular schedule. I think he's good to go. He should be ready again here. He threw too many pitches in his last start of the regular season, which was against the Dodgers. So both of these lineups did see both of these pitchers recently, so there is recent familiarity. There's a lot of familiarity here in general, but King did well in that game too, except that he was inefficient with his pitches, but he still went 5 innings and allowed no runs against the Dodgers, although a 3.2 strikeout walk ratio isn't that great, but he only had 3 hits, 0 earned runs. He allowed 1 unearned run in that game. It was still a decent start out of Michael King, and against the Dodgers, his stats are pretty decent in 98 at-bats worth. He's allowed 7 home runs, though, so that's the one problem here, but 3 of them are Ohtani. Ohtani just really has his number, but other than that, the stats aren't that great. Even though Mookie Betts does have 2 home runs, those are his only hits off him in 10 at-bats. He has a 31-9 strikeout walk ratio against him. He's held him to a 235 batting average, but mostly because of all those Ohtani home runs. He has a 779 OPS against him, which is a little bit high, but his other numbers besides the home run ball are actually pretty good against the Dodgers, and he's pitching at home here, so that might help a little bit as well. It's more of a pitcher's park, so because Buehler has good numbers in his career against San Diego and King is a good pitcher overall, I don't see the over in this one. There are just too many conflicting indicators there, and just too many conflicting indicators on the side as well. Like, I would probably lean to the guy who's just the better pitcher and is on schedule here, so I don't agree with the cash discrepancy on this one. I just can't. There's no way that I could play on Walker Buehler with what he's done recently this season. There's just nothing that indicates to me that he's really that great, even though, yes, he does have good numbers against these hitters in his career, but this season that has not really been the case. So slight lean to the San Diego side against what the market is indicating, but I can't do that either. So no play for me in this game, but it's an interesting one with a lot of conflicting indicators going on in this one. So that's what we got going on there. Emily, what's up? How are you doing? My only live viewer. No, I have 2. Oh, thank you. You saw me live. Is it on the Tower Game channel or is it Better Off Dead? Do you follow Better Off Dead? Mostly people follow Tower Gang and they go, what is this? And then they see me just autistically rambling about sports. All right, let's get into hockey here. I actually have to see what my hockey play is. I'll talk about the football game last because I always talk about football last. It is, you saw it right there. It is going to be on the Bruins, but it's actually, I screwed that up. It's actually plus 135 on the money line. I guess I'll just talk about the Bruins first and then briefly hit the other games, which again, like I said, I don't know that much about what's going on in hockey, but I like the spot for the Bruins in this one. So it's actually the second game up. We actually have an afternoon game, and I'll talk about them in sequential order. Why not? I don't have much to say about the afternoon game, which is St. Louis and Seattle. It'll be the first American game of the NHL season because the other 2 games, which were both won by the Devils, I believe, against the Buffalo Sabres, are both in the Czech Republic. So now the official start of hockey is starting, man. The official regular NHL season. St. Louis, Seattle is up this afternoon in Seattle. 85% of the tickets and 96% of the cash on Seattle. Seattle's moved up from minus 130 to minus 138. I think because there's football and playoff baseball going on, I think the hockey just gets less public attention anyway, so you have to kind of read into what's going on with these numbers here as far as, like, the public percentages don't mean quite as much in hockey because the public doesn't play hockey as much, even though this will be the first game of the regular season. I think the public is going to pay more attention to Boston, Florida. St. Louis, Seattle, I mean, kind of an interesting matchup. It's between two teams that barely missed out on the playoffs last year. Seattle, I think, has kind of changed up their lineup a little bit. I think they've added some pieces that probably should help, although I don't know too much about it. But I think they added Montour from Florida, which I'll mention more when I talk about Florida in a second, because he was one of the key guys on Florida as far as those playoff runs that they made, and he hurt my Bruins a couple of times there in the playoffs as well, and I believe he's on Seattle now, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But these market indicators to me are indicating on the Seattle side, so that's the way I would lean. And I don't do much with hockey totals, so I kind of just don't even really talk about totals at all. But the lean for me would be to the Seattle side there, just because it looks like the market is kind of strongly indicating on it, even though the public, when they're coming in on this, do seem to want that as well. But like I say, the public's not always wrong, especially in hockey when it's not a high volume of public play coming in here. But I think Seattle, they've kind of adjusted what they got going on there, and I think they are the better team over St. Louis coming into this season as well. So that's all I basically know about it. Like, I listen to some hockey professionals on these, and once the hockey season gets going, I do my usual like situational handicapping that I do with like the day-to-day. Like, there are a lot of things that you can apply to like most of these day-to-day sports, like especially NBA and NHL, but also somewhat in the MLB, where you want to look to like fade teams that are returning home from road trips and stuff like that typically. So that's the type of stuff I like to look for in sandwich spots and stuff like that. It all comes up in hockey. In the first game of the year, it's really hard to like find situational spots the way that I do things. So I tend to not do anything, but Boston, Florida, I'm doing it. I'm playing on the Boston Bruins plus 135 on the money line. I play mostly money line dogs in hockey. Like in baseball, you can kind of find like run lines to some extent. Hockey, you have the puck line, which you tend to pay more of a price for the puck line because hockey is the lowest scoring sport. So each goal is worth way more. So if you want to take Bruins plus 1.5 on the puck line, you'd be looking at like, I don't know, but probably laying like minus 190 to take them at plus 1.5 goals. So that's not going to happen. Just play the money line here at plus 1 whatever, because hockey, you know you're going to lose a decent amount of these money line favorites. What you're saying is, I think the odds of this team winning this game are better than what the odds you're giving me are. So you only need to win like 40-something% of those to actually profit from it. So that's what you do like in hockey with these money line underdogs. So yes, a fair amount of them will lose, but that's how you do it. Like, you're not saying that you definitively think this team's going to win the game, but you think they have a better chance to win the game than what you're being given. So you fire on those odds, man. The plus 136, 135, whatever it was. On Boston, Florida, it looks like the money line is up a little bit from minus 150 to minus 153. Kind of reverse line movement a little bit against the public, but I don't know, because that's not a huge line move. It's the smallest line move out of these three, so I don't put that much credence into that line move, really. And the line's been out for a while, so there could be some things going on there. Some other reasons for it, just like personnel changes and stuff. 64% of the tickets on the Boston Bruins, so the Bruins are somehow gaining the public action here, which wasn't the case like a day or two ago. The public was actually on the Florida side, and the cash percentage has been on the Bruins side the whole time, and it still is. It's 65%. So I am still leaning with where the cash percentage is, even though it's slight. Now, I don't like the fact that I'm on the public side in both of these games, but the public side means less in hockey, really. So the cash percentage still looks like it's on the Bruins, and I just think this is too much of a revenge spot for the Bruins, man. This is now double playoff revenge for the Bruins, because revenge, it's usually overstated, but in this case, when you're the Boston Bruins, and this is the team that eliminated you each of the last 2 seasons. 2 seasons ago, we all know the Bruins had like the best regular season in the history of the NHL, and then they got eliminated in the first round by Florida in 7 games after the Bruins had a lead in the series. They had a lead in the final seconds of that final game at home. Brutal loss. Then the Bruins were the lesser of the 2 teams last season in the playoffs, and the Bruins lost to Florida again. I wound up getting overwhelmed by Florida in the second round of the playoffs there, the whatever it's called, the conference semifinals, I guess is what it was, or whatever it was there. So Bruins losing to the Florida Panthers 2 years in a row, and Florida was the conference winner both years, won the Stanley Cup Finals last year, lost in the Stanley Cup Finals the year prior to that, I'm pretty sure. So the Bruins, there's a lot of revenge motivation here. If revenge is going to matter at all, it's going to matter in a spot like this. When you remember the team that eliminated you, and this is not just the team that eliminated the Bruins when the Bruins had that historical season, but the Bruins had their chance to get the revenge last year, and Florida beat them again. So I think the Bruins are going to be in an angry mood. So I think the Bruins have to have the more motivation here. And this is going to be Florida's banner raising ceremony, I assume, because they're the returning champs. This is their first regular season home game since then. So they're going to be raising the banner. That's probably going to anger the Bruins even more, even though it is going to be this huge thing. It should motivate Florida a little bit, but I think it could serve to make Florida a little bit overconfident, man. You could see them maybe in a bit of a hangover scenario. You get that Stanley Cup final hangover coming into this. It affects the loser more than the winner, typically, just like with the Super Bowl hangover, but still, it could affect the winner in a situation like this where the opponent is really out for revenge here, and I think that's going to piss off the Bruins even more, seeing that banner get raised. So, yeah, it's going to be a big celebration for Florida. I think it's going to be like maybe a situation where it's over celebration and they get a little overconfident and you're getting a little bit too much of an underdog price on the Bruins here. Another thing I like about the Bruins is that the Bruins looked like they were going to be coming into the season with goaltender uncertainty, but that's no longer the case because they signed Jeremy Swayman, and he is going to be the guy. So I think that alleviates that uncertainty. So now the Bruins can go into the season at least knowing that that's going to be the case. They know he's going to be the guy. They can start just playing. They don't have that uncertainty because that uncertainty can kind of get in your head a little bit and you don't know what's going on. But now Swayman is signed, and yes, I think he was overpriced. I think they could have gotten similar production without paying as much as they did. They gave him a huge contract, but at least that's going to give them some stability now where they know he is the guy. We're going to play behind this guy. We're going to be used to playing with him. They already are used to playing with him because he's been on the team for a while. He sort of became the guy over Ullmark last season. So now at least we know. So the Bruins played most of last season with goaltender uncertainty, to be honest. They didn't know who it was going to be. So now they know. So that's going to be good for the Bruins as well. That uncertainty is out of the way. So I like all that. And as I mentioned, Florida at least is now not going to have Montour anymore. And he was one of the guys who was a pretty key part of their playoff rotation the last couple of years. And he did some damage against the Bruins in those playoff series. He's no longer there at the very least. So the personnel will be a little bit different coming into this season as well. And I think we may be getting a bit of value on Boston just because of what happened last year where Florida was the better team. And maybe it's a little bit closer this season. Hopefully for my sake it is. And then we have the Utah Hockey Club, the debut of the Utah Hockey Club. I don't have too much to say about this. They're down from minus 170 to minus 162. 88% of the tickets and 98% of the cash on Utah. So it looks like Utah's getting the public, but they're getting the cash discrepancy as well. The public probably wants to come in on this just because of the nostalgia and because Chicago was terrible last year. So Utah, they actually get to be a big home favorite in their first game as a new team. And this is basically, I believe they're like the remnants of Arizona. So I don't know if they have the same players as Arizona because Arizona is now defunct. All their assets went to Utah. So how good could Utah really be? I don't know. Probably not that great, but who really knows? I mean, they are favored for a reason here, but maybe they're a little bit overpriced just because of the hype around them being a new team and whatever. But Chicago also was really poor last year. So Utah gets a decent matchup for themselves in their opening game. They get to play a beatable team in Chicago, but Chicago's got a lot of young pieces that are probably going to start to coalesce at some point with Bedard there and some other guys. Chicago's got a lot of guys that they drafted early in the last couple of drafts, so they're probably going to start coming together at some point. My only angle on this was I want to look to see like these expansion teams basically, because I think you can consider Utah to almost be an expansion team. In their home debuts, how well do they do? And I went back to 1991 when San Jose was an expansion team. I looked at all the expansion teams. There have been, I believe, 10 expansion teams since then have made their home debuts. And it's not a good scenario. I thought that maybe they would get motivated and play well, but a lot of those teams are just really, they just don't have the personnel to win a lot of hockey games. So a lot of those teams were losing teams. So they only went 3-6-1 in their home debuts. So not really great. So nothing really there. Nothing that makes me want to play against Utah either here, though. So, and of course, Vegas was one of the teams that won their home opener. You probably could have guessed that, but you never know with when it's just one game, but they were probably the best of the expansion teams, surprising everybody. And Seattle actually wasn't bad, like right out of the gate either, but they actually, I believe, were one of the teams that lost their home opener. So that's the way I look at those. And then college football, before I get out of here, we got Tuesday college football now, and it is Conference USA, Florida International against Liberty. Liberty's down from 19 to 17. So the line has moved down a little bit on Liberty, where you can get them. It's sitting on this key number of 17 now, but it looks like the public is on Florida International. Florida, Illinois, my guys. 77% of the tickets and only 66% of the cash coming in on FIU. So the public who is coming in on this game is thinking that this line is too big on Liberty. So you got a big public underdog here. It's crazy to see FIU gathering this much of the public action here. I just don't understand it necessarily. I mean, Liberty is definitely the better team, but Liberty, because of the hurricane canceling their game at App State 2 weeks ago, Liberty has not played for 17 days. So they've had more than 2 weeks off. So they could be a little bit rusty coming into this game, man. That is just, I think it's too much time off, especially for a Liberty team that's 4-0 coming into this season. They won all of their games so far, and then you have that momentum completely disrupted. You're supposed to play App State. Boone, North Carolina gets like nailed by the hurricane. It gets canceled. And then they had a bye last week. So Liberty hasn't played for over 2 weeks. So that's crazy. Maybe it's a little bit mitigated because Florida International did also have a bye last week. So they've been off for something like 10 days. So both of these teams have a lot of rest. But in Liberty's case, I think it's extra rest. And I think it could hurt their momentum a little bit. But Liberty is also not really like a rhythm offense. They're more of a running offense than a passing offense, which I think is an advantage to Liberty because they run the ball really well, and FIU defends horribly against the run. Their run defense is like their worst unit. They're a lot better against the pass. And then Florida is actually a passing offense as well, which I think Liberty is a little bit weak against passing offenses as well. So maybe there are some arguments there to play the over, and the total's gone up from 54.5 to 55 with 80% of the tickets and 90% of the cash on the over. So maybe a little bit of traction in the market on the over there because Liberty should probably be able to run the ball with ease. But the problem with that is that when you're running the ball, and then Florida International actually slows the pace of the game down too, even though I believe they throw the ball a decent amount. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe they do run the ball more because I know their offensive pace is actually slow. So you have a Liberty team that runs the ball and a FIU team that slows the pace down. So those really aren't exactly the elements conducive to an over there. So I just don't want to play the total here, man. It seems like it could go both ways to me, even though Liberty, yeah, I mean, they are a team that they run the ball well enough, and Florida International's run defense is bad enough that Liberty could gash them on the ground to such an extent that Liberty could get some pretty quick drives going with that rushing attack. You do see that in college football a lot, where just because a team runs doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to put up a bunch of points on the scoreboard. I mean, the lines, the market seems to be indicating that there probably are going to be a decent amount of points that could get scored in this game. We will see. And Florida International could be able to throw on Liberty's suspect secondary because I think Liberty lost like almost all of their secondary they had last year, and they haven't necessarily been that good this year. I think Liberty has just faced a really weak slate of opponents so far this season, so we don't really know how good they necessarily are, although the odds makers are telling you they're way better than FIU. I mean, FIU, they're only 2-2, but how good, they haven't faced a really tough schedule either, but how good could they be when they lost to Monmouth? I mean, really, an FCS team that Florida International scored a lot of points against them, and Florida International was in range to beat them at the end there, and they turned the ball over deep in Monmouth territory to lose the game right at the end there. But still, FIU's defense, that's an indictment of them because they give up 46, I think, to Monmouth. So that is just not good, man. So I don't know what to think about this. So you do have a suspect FIU defense there, really, that Liberty could score on. And as far as the side, I mean, the total is really hard to gauge. As far as the side, I would probably, I guess, lean to Liberty, and maybe that's the better way to look at this just because you're fading a very public underdog. And when you have a very public underdog, fading them more often than not is the right way to go. And the line, I agree, does just look really big, but I don't really want to jump in on a Liberty team that's had way too much time off and that might have their winning momentum disrupted a bit. So I don't love that side either. Obviously, I'm not playing this game. This game is just pretty much unplayable, but that's the best way that I would look in this game at the very least. And at least what you have with Liberty is that if they get out to a big lead and they could have the potential to score and to be able to just run amok basically with their rushing attack against FIU's pretty bad defense. So if that happens and Liberty does have a big lead, the fact that Liberty is so good at running the ball, it means that they're probably not going to allow FIU to really get back into the game that easily. So Liberty, you'll see them continue to run it on the ground, and that can help maintain and extend the lead late in the game if that's the case. So that's how I look at all those games, man. The two plays one more time before I get out of here are the over in Philadelphia and the New York Mets in the NLDS. Over 7. I found it at minus 115. I think there's a conflagration of events there that makes me like the over in that one. And the Boston Bruins. I should have put that it's NHL now that we have so many different sports going on. Boston. The Boston Bruins, baby. Let's go Bruins. Plus 135. It's not a homer pick in this case. I gave you the analysis on it. I think that there is a motivational aspect to that game. I think you're getting a little bit of additional value there on the Boston Bruins. That's going to do it for me. What's up, Smarty Bear? What's going on? Thanks, Smarty Bear. Thanks, Emily. Thanks for hanging out, guys. That's going to do it for me. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Of course, follow me on Twitter. Follow the Tower Gang Podcast, obviously, the most hilarious podcast on the planet. 3/5 of our co-hosts are about to get nailed by this hurricane that I will not say for sure is human engineered, but they are about to get nailed by that hurricane in Florida. So I don't know if we're actually going to have a Tower Gang episode this week or not. That remains to be seen, but every Wednesday night, usually at 9-11 p.m., go sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com/Tower Gang. Give us some money. You get live pre-shows, live post-shows, bonus content, hang out with us in a Telegram, and we're about to have a live event later this month. Bohemian Grove is Nephilim Death Squad's event. That's Top Lobster and The Raven. They'll be hosting that event. There are a lot of podcasters there. There are going to be some decent-sized names there. There are going to be stand-up comedians. Leonardo Joni, I think, is headlining the stand-up comedy event there. She is a hilarious, especially for a woman, she's hilarious. You usually don't see that out there. And she's very tall for a woman as well. So she's going to be there. Tower Gang is going to be there and have a live podcast event as well. I may or may not be hosting some sort of karaoke event there, too. It remains to be seen. That's, I believe, October 25th and 26th. Got to get those tickets, man, if you want to go. Prepare yourselves for that. That is going to be in Central Florida, somewhere outside of Orlando. I don't know exactly where, but in the rural central area of Florida, probably somewhere fairly close to the Top Lobster Ranch, probably. Peace out, guys. Have a good one. Let's win. Let's win today. As I always say, I always want to win, right? Obviously. Peace out. Thanks for hanging out.